Hey guys, my name is Lauren and you're on my YouTube channel, Not Your Clinical Supervisor. While I'm not your clinical supervisor, I am a board-approved supervisor, licensed therapist, and private practice owner. And today we are talking all about what to do if you find yourself lacking empathy for a client. Now, before we get into that, as always, this is not a replacement for clinical supervision, and always talk to your clinical supervisor. That being said, as a board-approved supervisor, I find that there's just certain things that everybody should know, topics that they should be aware of, skills that they should have in order to feel confident and competent as they are moving towards becoming licensed and even taking all of this information well beyond once you're licensed, wherever the road may take you. And not every clinical supervision looks the same. Everyone has a different experience. And so I have all the information that you need, answers to burning questions that you have, topics that you should be aware of, skills that you should have on your tool belt, all here on my YouTube channel. So if you are new, please subscribe, follow along so you can be notified of all of the content. Okay, let's get into it. So there are times where you may find that you are lacking empathy when you're working with a client. You might find yourself feeling frustrated by a client. You might find yourself going, I cannot sympathize with the client. I am just having a hard time being empathetic towards them, and they're really challenging to work with. Now, there are 5 things that I recommend you do if you notice you're in this position. And this can happen to anybody. This doesn't mean anything negative about you as a mental health provider. All this says is that we're human. We all have our own emotions and thoughts that we're dealing with and that we're carrying around. And sometimes that can show up in the therapy room, and we have to be aware of it and make sure that we're doing things about it so that we can continue to provide good clinical services. All right, so here are my 5 things that I recommend you do if you find yourself lacking empathy for a client. The first thing that I recommend that you do is try to take a step back and look at this from a different perspective. Now, there are 3 perspectives that I'm going to go over with you. The first perspective that I encourage you to try to take is looking at the client as if you were in their shoes. I know this can be challenging, but we all look at clients from our perspective. And it's very easy to look at a client and go, if I was them, knowing what I know, this is what I would do. This is how I would handle the situation. I would just leave that relationship. I would just tell this person what I think of them, whatever it might be. That's not good clinical advice. That's not sound advice to give to a client. And so if you find yourself struggling, it's important to try to take a step back and put yourself in the client's shoes. And what I mean by that is, if you were the client, given their history, their current coping tools, their current support system, their current phase of life, if you were them, would you look at the situation differently? Would you feel more empathetic towards the client? Would you think that it was a little bit more understanding for them to be struggling the way that they are, to be indecisive, or to be dragging their feet on certain issues? This is so important because looking at the client from their shoes is very different than looking at the client from our perspective, thinking what we would do if we were them. And I have found that it can be really helpful with gaining some empathy to try to put yourself in the client's shoes. The second perspective to take is to take the perspective of, if this person was someone that you cared about, if they were your friend, if they were your family member, would you have more empathy? Would you be more understanding? Would you be more flexible? Would you be less irritated by things that they're saying or not saying or doing or not doing? Because oftentimes we all have a tendency to be more compassionate and lenient towards people that we're really close to. And so could you envision this client being someone that you are close to and feel a little bit more empathetic towards their situation? The third perspective that I would take is one of neutrality. Try to take a step back from working with this client and just look at them from a very neutral place. This is actually a really healthy skill to develop when it comes to being a therapist or a mental health clinician, because our job is really not to take sides or to always agree with everything that the client is saying or to have certain biases. Now, we all can have biases because we're human and we're not perfect. But that being said, as a therapist or a mental health clinician, your role is to be more neutral. And so try to look at this client from a place of neutrality for a minute. Try to look at them from a perspective of, you know what, I want what's best for them. And also, if they don't follow through on this, I'm not going to lose sleep at night. I'm not going to have to do anything different. I'm not going to have to suffer consequences. They are in charge of the ship. I am here to help guide them and support them, but they're the one in the driver's seat. And so let me try to look at them from this place of, you know what? I care about you and I think this is a good idea and I really encourage you to do this. And also, I'm going to have a degree of separation so that if you don't do what you say you're going to do, I'm not so frustrated about it that I start to lose empathy. Now, I might be frustrated because I might be able to see, gosh, if you did this, this could be so helpful. But if it borders on the line of I'm starting to lack empathy for you, we've got a problem. So make sure that you are looking at it from a place of neutrality of I want what's best for you. And also this doesn't mean anything about me if you don't do what you say you're going to do. And I'm here when you're ready to work on these things. And also, I'm not going to drag you or force you to do those things because that never works. So those are the 3 perspective shifts that you can take to try to mentally get yourself in a different place where you feel more empathetic or understanding or less triggered by something that your client is doing. Alrighty, the second thing that I would do is I would think for a minute about what is coming up for me that's causing me to be frustrated or lack empathy for the client. Take a step back and really think and reflect on what is happening for me as the clinician in this moment that I'm having such a reaction to what the client is doing. Because oftentimes, as therapists or mental health clinicians, we have our own stuff going on. And so it's very easy when working with a client to have that stuff come out and to impact the way that we think about them, the way that we view them, the way that we talk about them, the way that we support them. Because again, we're human. And so we all have our own stuff going on. And so if this client in particular is trying to leave an abusive relationship and you can resonate with how hard that is or how freeing it is to finally do that, that could be really impacting your ability to be empathetic with that person. The same goes if it was the same situation, but you've never been in that situation before. It's very easy to go, well, I have no understanding or frame of reference for what it's like to be in this person's shoes or in the situation in general. I would never do X, Y, or Z. And so I'm just not feeling very empathetic towards them. If things like this are coming up for you, it's really important to take a step back and reflect and identify what these things are and then work through them so that they are not barriers to you helping this client, because this client needs you to be that neutral party and to show up for them and to support them. They do not need your stuff coming in and impacting what they're trying to do and the stuff that they're working on. If you notice that something is coming up, this leads me to my 3rd tip, which is seek clinical supervision. Seriously, talk to your clinical supervisor so you guys can reflect on what's coming up for you and also talk about some things that you could do to help you work with this client and to help you as a clinician feel more supported when it comes to working with populations in general that you feel like are harder for you to work with. Alrighty, the 4th tip that I have is to make sure you are engaging in good self-care. Sometimes we're not in a good place as the clinician, and that impacts our work with clients. Even if you think that it doesn't, the reality is that even if you didn't get a good night's sleep, you haven't eaten today, you are worried about paying your bills, you're arguing with your sister, you're dealing with like some medical issues, there's things that we are all going through that they end up coming out in the way that we feel for clients, the way we talk to clients, the way that we support clients, even if you're not consciously aware of it. Let's think for a second how this really can show up. Now, let's say for a minute that you did not get a good night's sleep, you did not eat breakfast this morning because you were running late, and you're running on a couple cups of coffee. The you that shows up to work with your clients today is different than the you that got a good night's sleep, is well rested, is energized, was not running late and anxious about being late, got a good breakfast, and is not just running on caffeine. While both of those therapists or clinicians might look similar, you're in a different headspace your thoughts are in a different place, emotions can be in a different place. And so this really does impact how you show up and how empathetic you are being towards a client. And so really think about your own self-care. How are you doing in terms of setting and maintaining good professional work boundaries? How are you doing when it comes to engaging in self-care? What is your stress level like? Are there things in your life that have been really challenging lately that really need addressed because it's impacting your work? Even something which might seem small, like you didn't get a good night's sleep, that can still impact you. So be mindful of all of these things, and please, please always engage in good self-care. I cannot stress that enough. There is something to be said about you being in a good place so that you can support clients, and the negative impact that happens when therapists are not in a good place and they still show up and they try to support clients. We could actually do harm if I'm in a really, really not good place and I'm not taking care of myself and I show up and I'm acting differently than I would if I wasn't in a good place. So think about self-care, think about work boundaries, really take time to focus on you and see if that helps you come back to the session in a different space. And my last tip, number 5, would be consider referring this client out. Now, I think it's really important that everyone understands that you are not a good fit for every person out there. You're just not. I'm not a good fit for everybody out there. You're not a good fit for everybody out there. And there is nothing wrong with that. I think actually it's important as mental health providers that we be upfront with clients about how I have certain expertise, I have certain training in certain areas, and I don't have certain training in other areas. And I'm not going to advertise that I am. I'm not going to take on clients that I feel like are out of my wheelhouse or they require a level of training that I just don't have. This is really, really important. So if you find yourself working with a client and you're like, I don't feel like I'm a good fit, or I'm working with a client and I feel like I'm struggling to be empathetic, it may be that you're not a good fit. And if so, there's a therapist out there who's going to be a better fit. And so this is something that I would take to your supervisor and ask, is this a possibility? Because we want to make sure that we are the best fit, but also that we're doing no harm. And if I can't be empathetic towards my client, I could potentially do some serious harm. And so it would be better for them to see someone else than to continue to see me. And this is really, really important. So please, if you feel like that there's just no way for you to utilize the other tips that I gave you, or you've tried them and you're still not feeling any different towards the client, consider referring them out to a different therapist. Alrighty guys, so there you have it. Those are my 5 tips on what to do if you are feeling like you are lacking empathy for a client. As always, subscribe, follow along, and stay tuned for all things mental health topics that come up, answers to your burning questions, and tips to help you feel confident and competent as you are on your licensing journey, and even far beyond once you become licensed, wherever the road may take you. All right, guys, I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye.